everybody, I'm Casera and today I'm going to be doing the Bagel Book Tag. First of all, I want to do a big thank you out to Kent from Von Bookingstein for tagging me in this video. It's my first tag that I ever got, so thank you so much and let's get into the questions. So the first is Plain Bagel, a writer that you feel does a really great job of the same kind of work. And for that, I'm going to have to go with Colleen Hoover. There is one of her books that I really don't like, but overall, I think she does a really great job of just compelling the reader to move forward. And all of her books are a little bit formulaic, so they're all kind of the same, but I still keep picking them up every time a new one comes out. Next is The Everything Bagel, a writer in which you own every work. I had a hard time figuring this one out, but I finally got one that I actually own most of their work. They do have two picture books that I don't have because they're children's books. But other than that, I own everything that she's done, and that is Suzanne Collins. So Suzanne Collins is very well known for the Hunger Games series, which I'm pretty sure everyone has, but she actually had a middle grade series before the Hunger Games, and that is The Underland Chronicles, which includes Gregor the Overlander, Gregor and the Prophecy of Bane, Gregor and the Curse of the Warmbloods, Gregor and the Marks of Secret, and Gregor and the Code of Claw. And I actually read that series like when it was coming out, before the Hunger Games, so I actually got on the Hunger Games bandwagon pretty early and read that before it got really popular because I was already following the author. The next bagel is Sesame Bagel, your favorite Sesame Street or Muppets book. I've actually never read a Sesame Street or Muppets book, but for this, I'm going to talk about a book that I loved before I learned how to read, because that's kind of like toddler age watches Sesame Street a lot. And for that, I'm going to have to go with Green Eggs and Ham by Dr. Seuss. I loved this book so much as a toddler. Every time someone would come over, I would have them sit down and read it with me. It got to the point where I pretty much memorized the book, even though I didn't know how to read, so I would read it for them, and they were always super amazed by how advanced I was in my learning, because I shouldn't have been able to know it, but I didn't actually know how to read. I just memorized the book. The next is The Poppy Bagel, a short book that gives you an ecstatic high. For that, I'm going with The Emperor's Soul by Brandon Sanderson. This is one of the first novellas that I read that I actually really liked. Most of the time novellas annoy me because I feel like they don't have enough substance to them, but this one is set in a world that I already knew because Elantris, his first book, is set in the same world, but it's completely different. It follows different characters, and I just really like the message that it was sending. The next bagel is Salt, the book that you had to put down to catch yourself, and that's Storm of Swords by George R.R. Martin. You probably already know what scene I'm talking about, but the red wedding caught me completely off guard. When I read that scene, I threw the book across the room and boycotted it for like 6 months before getting to the rest of this book because I was just so upset about it. The next bagel is The Garlic, a book genre that you can't get enough of. And this was probably going to be a little bit of a surprise, but that is YA romantic contemporaries. For some reason, I just devour these books. Like, they very rarely end up on my favorites list or my most surprising book list, but they're almost always on my disappointing and worst books of the year list. I still continue to follow those authors and read each book one after the other. So for some reason, I just love them. I don't own a whole lot of them because, like I said, I read them once and then I probably will never read them again. So for the most part, I borrow them from my library, but I just consume so many of them. The next bagel is The Onion, a book that may cause you to get some stares. And for that, I'm gonna go with like almost all of the books that I read, mostly the high fantasy books. I feel like when people see me reading a high fantasy book, they always stare at me weird. And I think it's because like they look at me and how I look and don't think, oh, she'll read a high fantasy book. For the most part, like if I read romance novels or even if I read classics, domestic thrillers, even YA, if I was just reading YA books, I feel like no one would care. But because I read fantasy, like it gets a lot of people, especially like if I read in a public place, like I would just notice it and it would just really annoy me. The next bagel is The Cinnamon Raisin, a sweet but thought-provoking book. For this, I think I'm gonna have to go with Lucky in Love by Casey West. This book is a romantic contemporary novel, so it is definitely sweet, but I think it's thought-provoking because the main character of this book comes from a very poor background, and at the very beginning of the novel, she turns 18 and buys a lottery ticket, and she wins the lottery for like $50 million. Follows like the kind of choices she makes and the things that she buys, and also how that money changes her relationship with her parents and her brother. It was one of those books that made you think. The next bagel is the French Toast Bagel, a writer that you're happy to have found this year, and for that I'm gonna have to go with Laini Taylor. I read The Strange, the Dreamer, and Muse of Nightmares this year, and I absolutely loved it. I didn't know if I would like it. I didn't expect to like it. I just kind of picked it up on a whim, and I love her writing style. I love the dreamlike atmosphere of the novels. I definitely plan on picking up the Daughter of Smoke and Bone trilogy later on, and I definitely want to just read all of her stuff. The next bagel is The Egg Bagel, a nonfiction work that caused you to form or switch an opinion. And for that, I think I'm gonna have to go with Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind. I found this book to have a very unique point of view, especially when he talks about imagined realities. A lot of the biggest systems that we have in place, like the Catholic Church and capitalism and the US government, are just there because someone thought it up one day. It's not permanent like how we feel it is when we're living here. So I just thought that was a really fascinating and unique point of view to take on it. The next bagel is The Rainbow, an LGBTQIIAP+ book that made you think. And for that, I'm gonna have to go with The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I think this just has some really great representation for bisexuals in it. I feel like a lot of people who are straight or gay don't really understand, but this book does a really great job of kind of showing how that's possible and think about the struggles these types of people went through during the time that it's set in. The next bagel is the Bialy, a fairy tale that you think people should read in its original form. And I actually don't have one for this one. I don't think I've ever read a fairy tale in its original form. So comment down below if you have an answer to this question and you think that there is a fairy tale that I need to read, because apparently I'm really lacking in this part. Last question is, what is your favorite kind of bagel and condiment? So my favorite kind of bagel is definitely the Sesame Bagel, and I like to eat it with plain cream cheese. And last is Bagel Tray, who do you tag? So I tagged Kate Mascio, I think that's how you pronounce your name. If not, please correct me. Kim from Bookhaven, Alyssa from Pages and Ink, and Ara from Ara's Bookish Archive. I'll put links down below to all the channels that I just mentioned. I'll also link the person who tagged me and the original creator of this tag. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you really enjoyed it. I definitely had fun coming up with the answers to these questions. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!